relativity, and ultimate truth, and a third is the doctrine of causelessness. The parikalpita belongs to worldly knowledge. When it is cut asunder, there is revealed the realm of the wise. As in the case of the magician who reveals multiplicity out of oneness, though there is really no multiplicity, so is the nature of the parikalpita view of existence. As with cataract of the eye, which makes one imagine various forms though the cataract itself has nothing to do with forms or no forms, so is the relative nature of existence to the unenlightened. Like unto pure gold, water free from dirt, and the sky clear of clouds, pure is the nature of the discriminated. There is no reality as discriminated in the parikalpita view of the world, but relativity itself exists. Assertion and refutation are done away with, which are the products of discrimination. If the parikalpita is non-existent because of the nature of relativity, what is existent has no existence, and what is existent is produced from non-existence. Depending upon the parikalpita, discrimination there obtains relativity. From the relationship of names and appearances there rises the parikalpita discrimination. But the parikalpita is not ultimately complete, it has no other way of birth than depending upon relativity. Thus it is known that ultimate truth is pure in its self-nature. There are 10 kinds of parikalpita and 6 kinds of relativity. As to that which is recognized as suchness in one's inmost consciousness, there is no differentiation in it. The 5 dharmas are truth, and so are the 3 svabhavas. Then the yogin has an insight into this, he does not go outside suchness. What is known as appearance and relativity, that in all the Chinese translations we have 12 instead of 10, is due to discrimination. But the phenomena of parikalpita take place depending upon relativity. When, however, existence is truthfully discerned by the intelligence, there is neither paratantra nor parikalpita discrimination. Nor is there anything to be called perfect knowledge, and how can there be anything to be discerned by the intelligence? That which is perfect is beyond the dualism of being and non-being. How can there be these 2 views of existence known as parikalpita and paratantra? In the parikalpita view of existence dualism is established, and with these dualistic establishments, multiplicity is seen discriminated, but pure is the realm of the wise. Multiplicity is discriminated indeed, it is discriminated depending upon relativity. If a man's discrimination takes place in any other way, he follows the doctrines of the philosophers. The discriminating is said to be the discriminated. The idea of causation grows from trying to formulate philosophical views. When the dualism of discrimination is gotten rid of, there is indeed that perfect view of existence. Single quote. The relation between the 5 dharmas and the 3 svabhavas may be tabulated as follows. In going over this tabulation as in the study of other parts of Buddhist philosophy, we must keep one thing always before our minds, as I stated elsewhere, which is, that Buddhist thought is always the outcome of Buddhist life. That its logic, or psychology, or metaphysics cannot be understood adequately unless we realize that facts of Buddhist experience are at its basis. And, therefore, that pure logic is not the key to the understanding of Buddhist philosophy. The 2 kinds of knowledge. The division of knowledge of truth into 2 forms, samvriti and paramartha, is also known to the author of the Lankavatara. But it was due to the Madhyamika school of Nagarjuna that the distinction was thoroughly formulated into a system. And they made most of it to account for the dual aspect of experience in their treatises on the doctrine of the middle path. In the Lankavatara we may say that the idea is foreshadowed when it makes reference to vyavahara, according to which the Buddha concedes the possibility of such concepts as being and non-being, birth and death, caused and causing, grasped and grasping, etc. Vyavahara, belongs to ordinary life where rules the principle of individuation. And as long as the relative and provisional existence of Maya is admitted, common parlance too has to be permitted for practical purposes. When the Sutra, however, goes on further down to explain the characteristic features of the Paratantra form of knowledge, the terms samvriti and paramartha occur, as we have just noted in the Gathas quoted, the former as leading to particularity and the latter as a mental state when this is transcended. The Gathas throw some light on what is meant by the Parikalpita and the Paratantra view of existence and at the same time on their relationship to the Madhyamika conception of Samvriti Satya. They are very complicated in meaning and difficult to expound exactly and in full. But the main idea seems to be this. Mind is set in motion when it allows itself to be conditioned by the principle of individuation. The Parikalpita and the Paratantra follow from this stirring up of mentation. The Paratantra is intellectual, for it operates depending on something outside itself. It is a kind of representation. It may not always be correct, but it does not create anything out of itself. The Parikalpita, on the other hand, weaves its own imaginative world regardless of its objective value. It is always in the wrong not only in a logical sense but psychologically. The main point about it is that it discriminates me and mine from what is not me and mine. And holding this distinction to be real and final, becomes attached to it, which culminates in moral egoism. When this is once asserted, all the evils follow that are to be found in connection with life. The Paratantra, which may be innocent in itself, becomes the most efficient handmaid to the Parikalpita. And what is created by it is also intellectually confirmed with all its practical consequences. The Paratantra and the Parikalpita are mutually dependent. The Parinishpana is to go beyond both these forms of knowledge. This is Paramartha, the highest transcendental wisdom, while the Samvriti form of truth prevails in the world of Parikalpita and Paratantra. The two kinds of buddhi which are elsewhere distinguished in the sutra may be considered to correspond to Samvriti and Paramartha. In the following lines, which are repeated in the Sagatharkam, truth or reality is contrasted with its reflected image or semblance. As the king or householder gives his children all kinds of playthings looking like deer and other animals and alluring and pleasing them by these, finally gives them real things. So I do, for I tell my children, by the aid of various forms reflecting realities, the ultimate truth which is to be realized in their inmost consciousness. Buddhi is a higher power of reasoning, but it also denotes any form of intelligence. The first is called Pravikaya Buddhi, which is a kind of absolute knowledge corresponding to the Parinishpana. Pravikaya means to search through, to examine thoroughly, and the Buddhi so qualified penetrates into the fundamental nature of all things, which is above logical analysis and cannot be described with any of the four propositions. The second Buddhi is called Pratisthapika, that is, the intelligence that sets up all kinds of distinction over a world of appearances, attaching the mind to them as real. Thus it may establish rules of reasoning whereby to give judgments to a world of particulars. It is logical knowledge, it is what regulates our ordinary life. But as soon as something is established in order to prove it, that is, as soon as a proposition is made, it sets up something else at the same time and goes on to prove itself against that something else. There is nothing absolute here. This setting up or establishing is elsewhere designated as samaropa. The four establishments are given characteristic marks, definite views, a cause, and a substance, all where there are none such in reality. Owing to these propositions definitely held up as true, opposite ones will surely rise and there will take place a wrangling or controversy between the opposing parties. The sutra thus advises the bodhisattva to avoid these one-sided views in order to attain a state of enlightenment which is beyond the positive as well as beyond the negative way of viewing the world. The twofold non-atman theory. We now come to a third distinctive feature of the philosophy of the Lankavatara, which is known as the twofold non-atman theory, i.e. nairatmyadvaya. The non-atman or non-ego theory is known among all Buddhist students as the most differentiating mark of Buddhism, but the denial of an atman or self-substance in externa objects is the specific property of the Mahayana and may require some explanation. To translate atman always by ego, or self, or soul, may not be right. And especially when its denial is applied to an objective world, egolessness has no meaning, it is merely the source of misapprehension. An atman means something substantial in possession of a number of qualities, and a free agent not bound by the principle of relativity. When its existence, therefore, is denied in us, it means that we have no such free agent within ourselves, enjoying a substantial exist-to-nce even above the concatenation of cause and effect. When we deny its reality in the world externa to us, it means that there is no self-substance in individual objects which come into existence, abide for a while, and finally disappear according to certain laws. In this case, nairatmya is niasvabhava, and when it is understood in this way, the idea falls in harmoniously with the other views maintained by Mahayanists. Though not yet formulated numerically by Buddhist scholars, there are 4 distinguishing marks in Mahayana ontology which constitute its very kernel. They are, that all things are empty, unborn, not dual, and without self-substance. Point 2. This sums up the metaphysical aspect of Mahayanism, and the dual non-atman theory is merely a partial recapitulation of it. The Lankavatara explains the theory in the following manner. The skandhas, dhehatas, and ayatanas have nothing personal in them. There is no me and mine in them. They are created by the ignorant affirmation of the desire to have, and attachment takes place when they are comprehended by the senses. The material world as well as the physical body are manifestations of the mind known as alaya vijnana. And when they are discriminated as particular existences, we are discriminating our own mind-made. When thus created they are seen in constant transmigration, they never remain even for a moment as they are, they flow like a stream, they change like a seed, they flicker like a candle light, they move like the wind or like a cloud. And when affections are stirred up, they are pursued by us, we behave like the monkey who is ever restless, or like the fly that runs after filthy food, and not knowing when we are satiated, and evidently to no good purpose, we burn like fire. Owing to the habit energy accumulated since time immemorial through wrong reasoning and attachment, we now transmigrate from one state to another, revolving like a wheel, like a machine, like a phantom creation, or like a walking ghost. When we realize this, we are said to have the knowledge of the non-existence of an individual ego soul. Dharma nairatmya jfi anam, as I said before, is gained by extending the knowledge of the non-existence of an individual ego soul to the external world. The two ideas are interrelated, and when the one is asserted the other follows inevitably. To say that all objects are devoid of self-substance is to recognize a most complicated system of relationship running through all existence. This was noticed by the Buddha himself when he discovered what is known as the chain of origination. But as his immediate interest was to free his disciples from ignorance and attachment, his statement stopped short at the theory of non-ego. With the development of Buddhist experience and thought, the psychology grew up into metaphysics, and the doctrine of sunyata came to occupy the minds of Mahayanists. And this doctrine is another way of saying that all objects are without self-substance. When the theory of non-ego is once established, all these stock ideas of Mahayana _ Buddhism are the necessary inferences. Sunyata, dharma nairatmya, nij. Niasvabhava, anutpada, anabhasa, mayapama, etc. The denial of self-substance means that just as the skandhas, dhehatas, ayatanas, are devoid 9f and ego soul and have no other creator than the desire to possess which expresses itself in deeds, thereby subjecting itself to an endless concatenation of cause and effect. So all things are by nature above such categories of particularity and generality, are distinguished as concrete individuals only through wrong discrimination which is so intensely cherished by the ordinary mind. The wise are not thus conference used. However, they are free from unwarranted inferences and attachments, as they know, by rightly reviewing the world of particulars, that the latter is devoid of mind, will, intelligence, the 5 dharmas, and the 3 svabhavas. When this is attained, the knowledge concerning the absence of Atman in all things is attained. To be devoid of mind, etc., means that the real nature of existence cannot be designated by any category of thought, for to be predicated means to be determined, to be limited. The truth, if it is really something that gives complete satisfaction to the yearnings of our religious consciousness, must be absolute, and to be absolute and thoroughly convincing such truth must be inwardly experienced. When an appeal is made to logic, a statement or proposition is to be proved according to rules of thought. And these rules are sure to be conditional, and, therefore, more or less one-sided and prejudicial. When the Mahayanists have to assert or deny, they run the risk of being judged by the rules of thought, and perhaps all they can establish in the circumstances is to say that all things are devoid of mind, will, etc. As above referred to, this is where Mahayana philosophers are always in a quandary, and this is the reason why the Mahayana teaching looks on the surface at least as self-contradictory or full of paradoxes. To apply the term Atman, ego, soul, not only to a person but to all inanimate objects may sound strange at first sight, as was stated above. But when it is realized that Buddhist philosophy has no special intellectual interest in the discussion itself except from the most pragmatical point of view, i.e., as concerned with life, with this person, with its salvation and enlightenment, the extension of the term self or soul over to all existence seems justified and appropriate. At any rate, the dual non-ego theory is one of the features of the Mahayana as differentiated from the Hinayana. The psychology of Buddhist experience. The doctrine of mind only. Having finished that phase of equipment which may be called logical for the upward career of the Bodhisattva, let us now pass on to the psychological phase, that is, the doctrine of consciousness, technically known as the theory of the 8 Vainathiyas. As I wish to repeat, Buddhism being a religion has no abstract interest in logic, or psychology, or metaphysics per se, and especially in the case of the Lankavatara the chief problem is to reach a state of self-realization.